The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to June's Solution Spotlight presented by Navient on the topic of image form composition. Click in the right place here. I am your presenter. Guy Schrader is my name. I am the Manager of Sales Engineering here at Navient, and just a few housekeeping items before we get moving here. Since this is a go-to webinar, your voices are all, muted on your end, so I cannot hear you if you've actually tried speaking to me so far. So if you do need to communicate with me, please use the chat box that you see in the GoToWebinar panel. And as always, a reminder that there is a survey upon the completion of this webinar. Please offer your suggestions for future topics, both for the solution spotlights as well as the support webinars that Navient host on a monthly basis, so we can better serve you and come up with topics that are of interest to you. So today we're talking about image form composition, right? This is going to be fast-paced, a lot of information to try to cover. By no means is this in-depth training whatsoever. I just wanted to put that out there. So there's going to be a lot of content being covered here. We'll go through what image form composition actually is, why you might need it as an organization. We'll actually get into some relatively deep details as for how it works, just to highlight some of the functionality, and we'll be using that through a screenshot demo, and ultimately circle around, talk about what it costs and some of the other requirements for OnBase, and hopefully leave a few minutes for questions and answer. So without any other delay here, image form composition was something that was introduced with version 16 of OnBase. So if you're running on a prior version, you are going to have to update to OnBase 16 to be able to use image form composition. But really what it is another module to OnBase that helps you and your organization to improve that process of taking those highly structured or regulated forms and getting them completed in a very nice, clean fashion, rather than a lot of the paper that might be coming into the organization completed in a variety of different ways. And all things said and done, we automate the collection of the data on that particular form via an OnBase Unity form. So this does require that you need to understand and be able to put together OnBase Unity forms, which in and of themselves are relatively simple to set up. But when we're using a Unity form, that gives us a lot of different capabilities to validate the data. So being able to use OnBase features such as data sets, autofill keyword sets, ensuring that required fields are set up, using conditional logic to make sure that if one value is populated in a field, we have appropriate values in other fields, or exposing different sections, so on and so forth. Again, Unity Forms is a key to this solution. That's how we're capturing all that information. Let's take advantage of all the benefits of Unity, what Unity Forms can provide. When we've collected that information once, we can generate multiple image forms from that single data collection form. So think of the scenario where you have a new employee. There's a lot of forms that need to be completed. Gather the new employee's demographic information via that single Unity form, prompt for all the questions that you might need that might be specific to the different forms. But now that single collection form can generate one, or frankly an unlimited number of image forms that come out of that. Signatures and other information that might be necessary at runtime can be captured also, because a lot of these forms, the reason why we capture paper, we need a wet signature. Well, effectively, we can capture the signatures through these image forms as they're actually created. So the generated image out of that does include those signatures, all of the data that was captured in the form, however we map that, and there's a lot of different capabilities there. And then any of those documents that are generated, the image form itself, can be distributed or routed through workflow. It's ultimately stored in OnBase as an image file that is now unalterable. But think of all the additional benefits behind the scenes with workflow to ensure that we get those documents in front of the right people. So why would you need it? Well, think, if you have a high volume of paper-based forms today, think of all the issues with that. You have to manage all that paper, you have to get it to the right place so that we can go ahead and scan it, That takes effort. Indexing those documents takes effort. You have to route and or distribute those forms. Again, that all takes effort. If we start with an image with all of that data, we effectively eliminate a lot of those different things there. If your forms are dictated by a third party, whether those forms be government issued forms or industry forms, something that you really don't have any control over, you're dictated to use this, image form composition is the perfect scenario for you. We'll talk a little bit later very briefly that OnBase has had document composition for quite some time, but that document composition is really limited based upon what you can do within Microsoft Word. Image form composition here, you can take an image. That's the background effectively to any data elements that we're going to place on this form through point and click capabilities. So also think when you get paper-based forms in, a lot of those are being filled out by hand, right? So they might be illegible information or things could be completely incorrect or incomplete. So instead, when we're using this image form composition, since we've captured the data via that Unity form, it's computer-generated text that's going to be dropping on the actual form itself, formatted, validated, making sure that all that conditional logic has been applied to capturing that information, ensuring that we have good information on that form when we first generate it. So how does it work? Really quick high-level graphic here. That data entry, again, is going to be done via a Unity form. So think anywhere that you can expose a Unity form, that could be the capture point for this information. From there, we generate that image form, but at that same point in time, any information that we need specifically from that user, such as signatures, such as dates, or anything else that might be considered runtime, that is generated, prompting the user, and then actually burning that all into an image that's generated as a result of this. That can be printed if you choose, but all things said and done, that image form is stored inside of OnBase, but that allows us to go ahead and now push that through any workflow process for any further validation, for routing, so on and so forth. Think of all the different things that OnBase workflow can do. So really quick before we jump into how this actually operates, there is support for multiple different languages. If your community that you're serving needs to have different forms in different languages, that can easily be changed just using the example here of Italian. Based upon any of the different fields that we have on the Unity form itself, can invoke a different background with all the appropriate labels and the appropriate languages being generated on that particular form. So let's take a look at this in action. Again, we need to start with that Unity form for that data collection. And that's going to be associated with at least one of the configured image forms. Like I said before, you could have it individually mapped, one Unity form to one image form that would be presented, or one Unity form to, frankly, an unlimited number of image forms. So let's just show this from the user perspective inside of OnBase here. So you can see here that I have a getting to know you form. This is just a sample of what could be done here. I could either create that form there, or I can natively go to my forms up on the toolbar to go ahead and select the appropriate form that I want to go ahead and generate. There's my getting to know you form, and that prompts me with my Unity form. This does not have to match up to the image form in any form or fashion. This is just the data collection piece. And since the US Open is running right now, I figured let's go ahead and use Dustin Johnson, who won the 2016 US Open. Again, this is all happening in Wisconsin, so a little bit of Wisconsin pride showing up here. But just to highlight here, we have different fields for Dustin's name, first, middle, last name, location, date, a checkbox. The form was created by completed by a representative. We want this in English. I have a second tab here for the additional information. What's your preferred season? That's a just selection boxes for the different seasons. What's your favorite ice cream flavor? That's going to be a data set behind the scene. Your music genre. Pop is selected. Miley Cyrus is the favorite musician. We have a multi-line data collection box for the superhero that he likes the best. We also have sections for 3 favorite books that we can go ahead and add additional sections, as well as the same thing for pets. So those are effectively just different sections of the Unity form where we can have either one or none or an unlimited number of different pets or the favorite books. So ultimately we can come in here and notice that there's also a tab once this is mapped up to an image form that shows us the different image forms that can be completed. When I go ahead and click on this image form, it actually generates that image on a background that I've configured. So here's my structured form with the box up at the top, with my different colors for my preferred season, my favorite ice cream flavor, so on and so forth. And you can see a variety of different things happening here. This is not a completed form. We'll actually be walking through how we set up the additional fields here, but notice a few things. Dustin's name is all in one line, yet the collection box had 3 separate fields for his name. The date actually has pre-configured slashes in there, so we entered that in the single date field. We need to parse that up. The circle around summer for our preferred season, the check boxes for our favorite ice cream flavor. Again, we didn't have check boxes on the Unity form. We can go ahead and convert some of those things. Favorite musician, I have pop with a checkbox around that. Again, that multi-line with the superhero with pre-configured lines separating each of that information. Here's a second page to this. There's our 3 favorite books, the pets, our signatures down at the bottom, email, dates, so on and so forth. So we have more information to actually work on to set this up. So I'm just going to go ahead and cancel this form. But I can always come down and submit or save my Unity form. That's my collection form that we can utilize at a later point in time. So before we get into the configuration of this, it's really important that you understand how your collection form, that Unity form, is designed, because we're going to be mapping the individual fields from that Unity form to the image form based upon the field ID. So you have to pay some special attention as you're setting up your Unity form to logically name the field names. Don't just take the defaults, because it's going to be more difficult to go ahead and configure this. Think of all the other conditional logic that you have, the data set values, any Boolean values, and how we're actually storing a yes, no, or is it 1, 0, or any other values, because that might be necessary from the conditional logic perspective to understand when I hit the drop down for, those radio buttons for my favorite season. When I click on summer, that's actually going to be stored, in my case, as all caps, summer. And capitalization is important to understand as we go along here. So just showing you an example of what I'm talking about here, today's date being a good example. In the lower left-hand corner there, my properties, the ID for today's date is actually form UF date. You need to understand that logic, because we're going to see all of those IDs when we're configuring our Unity form in just a few moments. Another example up on page 2, where we have what's your preferred summer. There you can see the ID is RDB seasons. That's important, but also I need to understand, since that is a radio button group, what are the different true values that are going to be stored inside that form when I selected any one of those. Notice everything is in all caps. So the point that I'm trying to convey here is, since you're mapping things from your Unity form to the image form, you need to understand all of those IDs, make sure that you understand how the values are being stored for other things. The Boolean values was another one. Is it yes, no? Is it 1, 0? Is it just 1 if it's checked and nothing if it's blank? So on and so forth. So the image form designers, where we're actually going to be setting up these actual image forms. That's the configuration tool. Now, prior to actually going in here and using that image form composition, we have to have our Unity form set up. That makes sense, right? Because we're referencing all those fields like I mentioned before. But we also need to have a document type set up, as well as the keywords associated to it, for that rendered image form. We're going to store this in OnBase. We are going to be mapping that up through the process. So as I get into this image form designer, by no means is this meant to be training. There's a lot of information that's being skipped here, but you can see here up on my toolbar that I have the ability to create new forms or open a specific form. We're going to actually open an existing form. When I do that, it's asking to select the appropriate form name. So this is going to be stored as an image form library somewhere on your network. Again, this needs to be kind of set up. This is not stored directly inside of OnBase. But behind the scenes, that form already has had imported to it the form, I'll call it the overlay for the form. So that could be the government form that we need to scan or get in image format. And there's some preferences for how that works best for the DPI and the file format, so on and so forth. But since I've selected a form, now I need to connect to OnBase. So we're connecting through an application server, but that's now going to return back all of the fields for the configured Unity form. And again, that's something else that's been configured already at this point in time also. What is that Unity form? What is that rendered image form document type? So as you can see here, in blue are all the different fields that I've mapped onto this form. Everything else is the pre-printed form that I've scanned into the system or imported in some form or fashion. And you can see that I'm missing a bunch of different things here. So we're going to be configuring this form just to show you a variety of the different capabilities here. By the way, you can zoom in based upon the slider down at the bottom, so I'm zooming in a little bit tighter. Let's start with that date. Okay, so far I have the month field, and we're assuming that this is a US form, so month, day, year is the format that we're going to be dealing with. On the left-hand side here are all of the different fields from my Unity form. So remember how we first started in taking a look at that date. That form UF date is what I need to select first off because I want to take a portion of that date and populate it on the form. And then using the mouse, you're just clicking and dragging to draw a box of a certain size where that date is going to be appearing, represented in the green at this point in time. When I release upon that, it's going to bring up this mapping editor. It already knows that my form UF date was my Unity form field that I've mapped up here, that it's a text type of information. But since this one's a little unique, we only want the month piece, the day piece of that entire date format to be pulled out. So we have scripts already pre-configured in the system for a variety of different things. You can see we can parse out the month, day, year from the date. We can parse out the area code, the exchange, the line number from the phone number. Same thing with social security numbers. A lot of this stuff is already pre-configured. You can script this even further if need be. So I'm going to go ahead and select my date, day. You can see the script that's actually noted down there. I just click OK. That's all that I need to put that onto the field, onto the form, and you can see it's already there. Let's rinse and repeat, do the same step. By the way, you can click on any of these fields to select it, change the size, double click on it to actually edit that particular field. But let's come back in here, select that same form UF date again, and let's take care of the year. That's going to be very similar as we put that together. My script is date and year. I'm picking up the pace here for a number of things, just only highlighting those changes as we go along here. So the city we want to drop into our field. We draw that zone in a similar fashion. Since we're not manipulating that city field whatsoever, that's just straight text. It's just our city form field. Same thing with the state. I just drop that on the form. Notice in the middle here with the mapping location, the XY coordinates, the width, the height, the font size, that's all adjustable. You can change this as need be to make sure everything is fully tweaked. And finally, the zip code, we're doing the exact same thing, dropping that on the form. And again, that's a text type. Now, getting down to the preferred season, we only have configured the spring and summer so far. We need to configure the fall. Remember how we saw that on the rendered image form? That was a circle. That's a nice feature of the Unity form, the image form, that we can go ahead and select our RDB seasons from the pane in the left and draw the size of the circle that we want to be creating, release upon that. Now remember how we saw that on the Unity form. That was a radio control box saying spring, summer, fall, winter. One of those is selected. I didn't circle anything, so we have to interpret that radio button group into a circle here. So what we're effectively doing is we're saying rather than a text type, because I don't want the words printed here, I want to go ahead and have a checkbox. Okay, and stick with me. I know that this is not a checkbox, but that's one of my options here for the type. But down here I can see a couple things. I need to have a match value of fall. When the fall value is stored for that field on the Unity form, that's where we're going to go ahead and invoke, instead of a checkbox check type of X, we're going to actually go ahead and circle that information on that particular form. So we can convert things. We're not talking just straight about text. Rinse and repeat for the winter section. That's going to be very similar, but notice our match value is now winter and our check type is circle. Highlighting a few other features. Notice my favorite ice creams, my vanilla, my chocolate. Oh, by the way, before we get there, there is a whole filter search within my fields. I typed ice because I know ice cream is in the name, rather than me searching through a long list that might be a lot of fields on the Unity form. I can go ahead and limit things. So the cell ice cream, again, this is where we need to understand our Unity form. I can draw the box, the size of that checkbox. That again is going to be a checkbox. I have a match value because that was a drop-down list before, recall, but this is now a check type of X. Same thing for chocolate. I'm going to kind of fly through this. This is the exact same thing as we had before with the check type of X. Okay. Notice I have a scroll bar on the right side. I can go ahead and scroll down on my screen just to kind of change a few more things. I can clear out my filter to get back to all of my things. This favorite musician, remember how that showed up on my Unity form. I had a drop-down list for my favorite genre, but then I had a single field value for my favorite artist for that genre. So again, knowing my Unity form, that's actually my TXT music. I draw that zone accordingly next to my pop field, but that's conditional logic. I only want that artist listed on this field if my pop genre was selected. So that's still a text box up here on the top, but now I'm dealing with conditional mapping where I say my related field is my favorite music that I have listed down here, and then the match value is actually pop. However it was stored. Again, that's still a text box. So we have that conditional logic that can be applied. Let's do the same thing for rock. Exact same thing for that next field down. Now, which superhero do you like best? Remember, that was a multi-line text box. So anybody could type anything. That could be one line, it could be 5 lines, but I have this pre-configured section here where I have the lines in between. Notice I have 4 lines of information. We can accommodate something like that also by now setting the type to a multi-line, but controlling the line height. And this is all in pixels. So there might be some playing around here to get this to fit properly. 39 pixels high per line, font size of 16. You might actually have to test this out a little bit as you go along here. We have multiple pages within here, so I can switch to my second page. My 3 favorite books are perfectly fine, but now we're dealing with repeater sections here for our pets. Notice those are Unity forms. If you're familiar enough with Unity forms, my animal type, that's going to map to my type of animal that we actually see a little further down here. There you can see there's my repeater field, but row 3 of that repeater because I'm looking for the 3rd animal that I might have. Same thing for the check boxes. That's my current pet, yes or no. That's going to be the 3rd line of the repeater again. But now that's a checkbox, and only if my match value is yes do I want the check to actually be placed in that field. Looking at my no in a similar fashion, 3rd row, checkbox, but only if my match value is no do I want that X there. So you can see the complexity of these different forms, and then the pet name. There's my pet name again in row 3, but that's just strictly text at this point in time. And I know I'm jumping forward because we're running tight on time already. So if I come in, there's some other things also. So anything that's going to be prompted at runtime, like the signature or any text information, that can be placed on the form. So our representative, we want to be prompted for a signature only if the form was completed by a representative. That checkbox above, but that was a checkbox on the Unity form. So you can see it's a signature type, but notice I have the ability to say that is required only when we have a condition met where the check form completed by a rep, again, that's the field name on the Unity form, was set to 1. That's my Boolean value. It wasn't set to yes or no, and that's where you have to understand your form. And then we can go ahead and put in a text annotation for like an email address, again, in a similar case, only when our check form completed by the rep was set to 1. Otherwise, let's go ahead and throw a signature on there for the actual employee or the actual individual. Oops, let me come back here. Check form completed by a rep was set to null. There's no value. Again, this goes back to that Unity form, and the same thing for the email value. Only when the related field match field is set to no value do I want to go ahead and prompt for that. So we can then change the language if need be. Notice this is a Spanish form that's behind the scenes, so this would have to be mapped out a little bit differently. Ultimately, we're coming in and saying saving and publishing, and again, I know I'm missing some steps here. I'm actually going to speed through this. We need to upload that into OnBase as a specific file type. But then if I come back to that same Unity form that I completed before for Dustin Johnson, again, looking at my information, I can come into my map forms and open up the appropriate form. I changed some values here. I changed his preferred season to winter, but you can see now everything is actually populating properly, just to show you how that all interprets from the Unity form onto this particular document and then the page 2. Now notice the representative, since I did say that this was completed by a representative, that checkbox has been actually filled in on the form, but down here you can see I need to click to actually sign that form. That would integrate with any signing device, or again, you can use the mouse here to complete that information, and then clicking on that email, I can go ahead and type in the email address that gets burnt into the image. I can then save and close. That is now stored in the system as a different document type. My getting to know you form, not the UF, but the one right after that is actually the image form that I have that I can open up at any point in time. A more reasonable representation, thinking of government issued forms, everybody's completed probably multiple W-4s in their lifetime. Here I just set up a Unity form to collect all the data for a W-4. Again, this doesn't look like the W-4 whatsoever, but I'm capturing all the information that's necessary that's going to be completed on that W-4. And then I have that map form up top there for my W-4. When I open that up, you can see that it actually mapped all that information appropriately on the form. This was done using image form composition, and then also with the ability to go ahead and to click and sign John Doe's information, as well as any date that needed to be completed right at that point in time. Click OK, save it in the system. There, my W-4 has actually been completed without ever generating any paper. All right. That's a lot of information, I know, but there's a lot of capabilities to the module. I think it's a really, really nice addition to OnBase that allows you to do a variety of different things that you previously couldn't do in OnBase. So think of this as something different than like a fillable PDF that has its own challenges and licensing issues. This is now fully integrated inside of OnBase. Leverage that OnBase investment as best that you can. So the cost. The module itself is $15,000. There are some additional requirements here. This only works within the Unity client server. That's how Highland developed it. We saw before that we needed to have Unity forms involved here. And effectively, workflow is being used to create that final form rendition. You can use workflow and a variety of additional methods to go ahead and push these documents out to other people for review. And then OnBase 16 or greater, as I noted before. Just some complementary products that I wanted to highlight. Think Unity Briefcase. Since I'm dealing with a Unity form that could be captured anywhere, Unity Briefcase would allow you to go offline, create those forms, store them locally on your laptop that has Unity Briefcase installed, but then to be able to come back in the office and then synchronize that Unity form and then create that image form. Document composition, as I mentioned before, has been a product that's been out there for OnBase quite some time. It just doesn't have the flexibility, the capability of putting things on a nice form unless you can design something inside of Microsoft Word. So I just wanted to bring that up. That was a whirlwind tour. Hopefully everybody saw some benefit with that. But with that, I leave you time for some questions. While I'm waiting to see whether any questions are coming in, I just wanted to highlight some of our upcoming events. We do have a webinar coming up later this month on June 27th at 9:30 in the morning on the topic of case management, a new mindset for solving business problems. In July, we have a support webinar. OnBase 17, if you haven't heard, is going to be released very, very soon. But we'll be highlighting on the 19th of July all of the changes that we've been able to compile as it relates to OnBase 17. And one other plug, we do have hosted OnBase training for OnBase System Administrator taking place in our Verona Training Center at the end of July. So please take a look at our website for any of these to register. Navient.com is the website. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I don't see any questions at this point in time, so sorry for running just a minute or two late, but thank you for taking the time to attend. We will record this, and this will be posted with a link from our website within the next day. Thank you so much for the time. I will stick around to answer any questions that you might have. Have a great day, everybody.